first time it happened, Min Seo-yeon thought she was having the strangest déjà vu of her life. The cherry blossoms outside her small apartment window in Hongdae were blooming in exactly the same pattern, the same gentle breeze carrying the same sweet scent through her half-open window. Her phone alarm was playing that annoying tune she'd been meaning to change for weeks. 6:30 a.m., April 15th, 2024. She stumbled to the bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and stared at her reflection. 26 years old, working as a graphic designer for a small marketing company, living paycheck to paycheck in one of Seoul's most expensive districts. Nothing particularly special about her life, nothing that would warrant the universe's attention, yet here she was, feeling like she'd lived this exact morning before. The coffee shop downstairs was bustling with the usual morning crowd. Mr. Kim, the elderly owner, was wiping down tables with the same methodical precision he'd shown every morning for the past 2 years since Seo-yeon had moved to the neighborhood. She ordered her usual, an iced Americano with an extra shot, and grabbed a croissant that looked suspiciously like it had been sitting there since yesterday. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" Mr. Kim said, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Perfect weather for the Cherry Blossom Festival in Uido Park." Seo-yeon nodded absently, her mind already racing toward the presentation she had to give that afternoon. Her company had landed a major client, a luxury skincare brand looking to rebrand their image for the Korean market. Months of work had led to this moment, and she couldn't afford to mess it up. The subway was packed as always. She squeezed into car number 4 of the Line 6 train, finding herself pressed against the window as the train pulled away from Hongik University Station. That's when she saw him. He was standing on the platform they'd just left, a tall figure in a charcoal grey coat, his dark hair slightly tousled by the morning breeze. For just a moment, their eyes met through the train window. His expression was strange, not the blank, tired look most Seoul commuters wore, but something intense, almost desperate, as if he was trying to tell her something important. The train rounded a curve, and he disappeared from view. Seo-yeon felt an odd pull in her chest, a sensation she couldn't quite name. She'd never seen him before, yet something about his face felt familiar, like a half-remembered dream. Her presentation went well, better than well, actually. The clients loved her concept of blending traditional Korean aesthetics with modern minimalism. Her boss, Director Park, actually smiled at her for the first time in months. She celebrated, with her colleague Jina at their favorite pojangmatcha, sharing soju and gossiping about office politics until well past midnight. She fell asleep that night feeling accomplished, tipsy, and optimistic about her future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new possibilities. Except tomorrow never came. She woke up to the same cherry blossoms, the same gentle breeze, the same annoying alarm tune. 6:30 a.m., April 15th, 2024. Again. At first, she thought it was just a weird dream, but when Mr. Kim made the exact same comment about the weather, when she saw the same croissant in the exact same position, when she found herself in the same subway car, looking at the same mysterious man on the platform, she knew something impossible was happening. This time, she paid more attention to his face. Sharp jawline, expressive eyes that seemed to hold years of sadness, a small scar near his left temple. He was probably around her age, maybe a year or two older. When their eyes met, his mouth moved as if he was trying to say her name, but the train pulled away before she could make sense of it. The presentation went exactly the same way, word for word, gesture for gesture. Director Park smiled at the exact same moment. The clients asked the exact same questions. Jina suggested the exact same pojangmatcha. But this time, Seo-yeon went home early, her mind racing with questions that had no logical answers. She spent the night researching time loops, parallel universes, quantum physics, anything that might explain what was happening to her. She found plenty of science fiction stories and theoretical discussions, but nothing that could help her understand why she was trapped in April 15th, 2024. The third loop was when panic set in. She tried everything, sleeping in different positions, eating different foods, taking a different route to work. Nothing changed. She was stuck, reliving the same day over and over, watching the same people make the same choices, having the same conversations, living the same 24 hours on an endless repeat. By the 10th loop, she'd tried calling in sick, traveling to different parts of Seoul, even getting arrested for disturbing the peace in Myeongdong. No matter what she did, she woke up in her bed at 6:30 a.m. on April 15th, 2024. By the 20th loop, she'd memorized every detail of the day. She knew that Mrs. Choi from apartment 3B would drop her keys at exactly 7:42 a.m., that the businessman in the blue suit would miss his train by 3 seconds, that the young mother with the crying baby would get off at Hapjeong station, and she knew that the man on the platform would be there, watching her train pass by with that same desperate expression, his mouth forming words she couldn't hear through the glass. It was during the 37th loop that she decided to get off the train. The doors slid open at Hongik University Station, and instead of staying in her seat, Seo-yeon pushed through the crowd and stepped onto the platform. Her heart was pounding as she looked around for the man in the charcoal coat, but he was nowhere to be seen. "Excuse me," she called out to a station worker. "Did you see a tall man in a grey coat? He was standing right here a minute ago." The worker looked at her as if she was crazy. "Miss, there's no one matching that description here. Are you feeling all right?" She spent the rest of that loop searching every corner of the station, every exit, every platform. He had vanished, completely, as if he'd never existed at all. But she knew what she'd seen. She knew he was real. The loops continued. 45, 50, 67. She started experimenting with different approaches. Sometimes she would spend the entire day in her apartment, reading the same books over and over, memorizing entire novels. Other times, she would wander Seoul, exploring neighborhoods she'd never visited. Knowing that none of it would matter when she woke up the next morning, she learned to play guitar from a street musician in Hongdae, mastering songs she'd never heard before in just a few loops. She studied Korean history, practiced her English, even learned basic Mandarin from Chinese tourists in Myeongdong. Knowledge was the only thing that seemed to carry over from one loop to the next. But knowledge couldn't fill the growing emptiness in her chest. She was completely alone in this experience, the only person in the world who remembered living this day dozens of times. She tried explaining it to Jinnah, to her parents, even to strangers on the street. They all looked at her with concern or confusion, some suggesting she see a psychiatrist. It was during the 93rd loop that she first considered giving up entirely. What was the point of living the same day forever? What was the point of anything if time itself had broken down around her? She was sitting on the roof of her apartment building, looking out over the sprawling city of Seoul, when she heard footsteps behind her. "I was wondering when you'd come up here," a voice said. She turned around, and there he was, the man from the platform, the man in the charcoal coat. He was even more handsome up close, but there was something tired about his eyes, something worn down, as if he'd been carrying a heavy burden for far too long. "You're him," she whispered. "The man from the subway station." He nodded, walking closer to the edge of the roof. "My name is Kang Min-ho, and I've been looking for you for a very long time." "Looking for me? But I don't even know you. I've never seen you before except on that platform, and you disappear every time I try to find you." Min-ho was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the city lights below. "What's the last thing you remember before the loops started?" Seo-yeon frowned. "What do you mean?" "I remember everything about April 14th. I had dinner with my parents, watched a drama, went to bed early because I had that important presentation the next day." "Think harder," he said gently. "Is there anything else? Anything that felt different or strange?" She closed her eyes, trying to remember. April 14th had been a normal day. She'd gone to work, dealt with some revisions to her presentation, grabbed lunch at the usual place. In the evening, she'd met her parents for dinner at a Galbi restaurant in Gangnam. Her mother had asked about her love life, as usual. Her father had given his standard lecture about saving money, nothing unusual. But then, as she was walking home from the subway station, she'd felt like someone was following her, She turned around several times, but never saw anyone. There had been a strange feeling in the air, like the moment before a thunderstorm. And just before she'd fallen asleep, she'd heard, "What? A voice? A whisper?" "I can't remember," she said, opening her eyes. "There's something, but it's fuzzy, like trying to remember a dream." Min-ho nodded as if he'd expected this answer. "That's because your memory of that night was altered, modified to protect you from the truth." "What truth? What are you talking about?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small silver object. It looked like a compass, but instead of pointing north, the needle was spinning wildly, never settling in any direction. "This is a temporal displacement detector," he said. "It reacts to disruptions in the timeline, and right now it's going crazy because we're standing in the middle of the biggest temporal anomaly Seoul has ever seen." Seo-yeon stared at the device, then at Min-ho. "You're not making any sense. Temporal displacement? Are you telling me this is some kind of science fiction situation?" "I'm telling you that you're trapped in a time loop because someone is trying to prevent you from dying." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Dying? What do you mean, dying?" Min-ho's expression was gentle but serious. "On the original, April 15th, 2024, you were supposed to die in a car accident on your way to work. A drunk driver ran a red light at the intersection of Hongik Row and World Cup Row at exactly 8:47 a.m. You were crossing the street, thinking about your presentation. When he hit you," Seo-yeon felt the blood drain from her face. "That's impossible. I take the subway to work. I never walk through that intersection." "You did that day. Your usual subway line was experiencing delays due to a signal malfunction, so you decided to take the bus instead. The bus stop is right at that intersection." She tried to process what he was saying, but it felt like her brain was short-circuiting. "Even if that's true, how do you know all this? And why are you here? Are you some kind of time traveler?" Min-ho sat down beside her on the ledge, his movements careful and deliberate. "I'm what you might call a temporal guardian. My job is to monitor and protect the timeline from major disruptions. When someone with a significant impact on the future dies before their appointed time, it can create ripple effects that damage the fabric of reality itself." "Significant impact? I'm just a graphic designer. I'm nobody special." "That's where you're wrong," he said, his voice soft but firm. "In the original timeline, your death caused a chain reaction. Your presentation that day was supposed to revolutionize Korean marketing, leading to international recognition and eventually a breakthrough in how brands communicate across cultural barriers. Your work was supposed to inspire a new generation of designers and marketers, changing the entire industry." Seo-yeon shook her head. "That's ridiculous. It's just one presentation for a skincare company. That presentation leads to you being headhunted by Samsung. Within 5 years, you become the youngest creative director in their history. Your campaigns don't just sell products, they change how the world sees Korea. You help export Korean culture in ways that make the Hallyu wave look small. Your work influences everything from fashion to technology to entertainment." The scope of what he was describing made her dizzy. "And my death prevents all of that?" "Your death creates a void. The campaigns you would have created never exist. The cultural bridges you would have built never get constructed. The young designers you would have mentored never find their calling. It's like pulling a single thread and watching an entire tapestry unravel." Min-ho stood up and walked to the other side of the roof, his back to her. "The universe tried to self-correct by creating this time loop. As long as you're stuck in April 15th, you can't die in that accident, but you also can't move forward to fulfill your destiny. So I'm trapped forever. Not forever. The loop will eventually break down. Time isn't meant to be bent this way. Already, I can see the stress fractures forming. Reality is starting to fray at the edges. If we don't fix this soon, the entire timeline could collapse." Seo-yeon felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was telling her. What happens if the timeline collapses? "Everything you know ceases to exist. Not just this day, not just this year, but all of it. Past, present, and future. All gone. She was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the weight of his words. Finally, she asked, "How do we fix it?" Minho turned back to her, and she saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Hope. "We have to break the loop from the inside, but it's dangerous. If we fail, you die, and the timeline collapse accelerates. And if we succeed, you live. You go on to change the world in ways you can't imagine." But he hesitated. But what? But the process will reset everything. All the memories you've accumulated during these loops, all the skills you've learned, all the knowledge you've gained, it will all be erased. You'll wake up on April 15th with no memory of any of this. You'll live that day naturally. Avoid the accident through random chance and continue with your life. Seo-yeon felt a strange sense of loss at the thought of forgetting everything she'd experienced. These loops had been torturous, but they'd also been hers. She'd grown during this time, learned things about herself and about life that she never would have discovered otherwise. "Will I remember you?" she asked. Minho's expression grew sad. "No, you'll have no memory of me at all." "What about you? Will you remember?" "I always remember," he said quietly. "It's part of the burden of being a temporal guardian. I carry the memories of every timeline I've had to repair, every person I've had to save or let go." There was something in his voice that made her look at him more closely. "This isn't the first time you've saved someone, is it?" "No, it's not." "Is it the first time you've saved me?" Minho was quiet for so long that she thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "This is the 7th time." The revelation hit her like a thunderbolt. 7 times? You mean this has happened before? Different circumstances, different dates, but yes. You have a remarkable tendency to die at crucial moments in your life. Car accidents, building collapses, random crimes. Fate seems determined to cut your life short before you can fulfill your purpose. And you've saved me every time. Every time. Each time, I have to watch you live your life with no memory of who I am or what we've been through together. Each time, I fall in love with you all over again. And each time, I have to let you go. The confession hung in the air between them, like a bridge neither of them knew how to cross. Seo-yeon felt her heart racing, not just from the shock of his words, but from a recognition that she couldn't quite name. "How is that possible?" she whispered. "How can you fall in love with someone who doesn't even know you exist?" Minho walked back to her, his movements slow and deliberate. "Because even though you don't remember me, you're still you. Your kindness, your creativity, your determination to make the world a little bit better, those things don't change. In every timeline, in every loop, you're still the woman who gives her umbrella to strangers in the rain, who stays late to help struggling colleagues, who sees beauty in the smallest details." He sat down beside her again, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "In the 3rd timeline, you were a teacher. You died in a school fire while making sure all your students got out safely. I spent 6 months in that loop, watching you inspire those children every day, seeing how you changed their lives with your patience and creativity. In the 5th timeline, you were a journalist. You were killed while investigating corruption in a major corporation. I watched you spend weeks gathering evidence, driven by your need to protect innocent people from being exploited. And in each timeline, even though you had no reason to trust me, no memory of who I was, you still showed me kindness. You still tried to help when you saw I was struggling. You still smiled at me like I mattered." Seo-yeon felt tears forming in her eyes. "That's so sad. You're carrying all these memories alone." "It's the price I pay for the job," Minho said. "But seeing you alive and happy in each new timeline, knowing that you're going on to do incredible things, it makes the loneliness worth it." She looked at him, really looked at him, and suddenly she understood why his face had seemed familiar on that first loop. "I do remember something," she said softly. "Not clearly, but There's a feeling. Like I've known you for a long time. The soul has its own memory, Minho said. Deeper than what the mind can access. Maybe some part of you recognizes some part of me, even across timelines. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights twinkle below them. Seoul stretched out in all directions. Millions of people living their lives, unaware that their entire existence hung in the balance of what would happen next. How do we break the loop? Seo-yeon finally asked. Minho pulled out another device from his coat. This one looked like a small tablet with symbols that seemed to shift and change as she watched them. This is a temporal stabilizer. It can reset the timeline, but it requires a conscious choice from the person trapped in the loop. You have to want to break free, and you have to be willing to accept the consequences. Which are, we don't know for certain. Each timeline reset is unique. You might wake up on April 15th and simply avoid the intersection where the accident would have happened. Or you might wake up on April 14th with just enough memory to make a different choice about how to get to work, or the entire sequence of events might shift completely. What's the worst case scenario? Minho hesitated. The worst case is that breaking the loop causes a temporal rebound. Instead of moving forward, we might snap back to an earlier point in your life, losing months or even years of progress. And the best case? The best case is that you wake up tomorrow, the real tomorrow, and go on to live the life you were meant to live. Seo-yeon stood up and walked to the edge of the roof, looking out over the city that had become both her prison and her home for the past 93 days. Can I ask you something? Anything. In all these different timelines, do I ever love someone? Do I ever have a family, a husband, children? Minho was quiet for a moment. In the timeline where you were a teacher, you married a fellow teacher named David. He was American, teaching English at an international school. You had 2 children together, a boy and a girl. You were very happy. And in the others, in the journalist timeline, you were dating a photographer named Jun Seo. You were planning to move in together before... He trailed off. Before I died. Yes. What about this timeline, the real one, where I'm a graphic designer? Was I supposed to meet someone? Minho turned away from her, and she could see the tension in his shoulders. Yes. Who? It doesn't matter. The important thing is that you get to live to find out. But Seo-yeon was beginning to understand. It's you, isn't it? In the real timeline, I was supposed to meet you. When he didn't answer, she walked over to him and gently touched his arm. Minho, look at me. He turned and she could see tears in his eyes. It doesn't matter, he said again. My job is to protect the timeline, not to live in it. I exist outside of normal causality. Even if we met in the real timeline, it wouldn't work. I can't age normally. I can't settle down. I can't be part of anyone's permanent life. But we were supposed to meet? You were supposed to miss that subway train because you stopped to help an old man who had fallen. While you were helping him, you would have met me. I was there on guardian business, monitoring a minor temporal anomaly. We would have talked, gotten coffee, discovered we had everything in common. Within 6 months, we would have been inseparable. Seo-yeon felt a deep ache in her chest, as if she was mourning something she'd never actually had. And then? No. And then I would have had to tell you the truth about what I do. And you would have had to choose between a normal life and a life with someone who exists outside of time. Most people choose normal. I wouldn't have blamed you for making the same choice. But you don't know what I would have chosen. No, he admitted. I don't. She was quiet for a moment, processing everything he'd told her. What if we broke the loop differently? What if instead of resetting the timeline, we found a way to work within it? What do you mean? I mean, what if I chose not to go back to the real timeline? What if I chose to stay here, in this loop, with you? Minho shook his head immediately. That's not possible. The loop is already breaking down. I can feel it. We have maybe 10 more iterations before reality collapses completely. Then we have 10 more days together. Seo-yeon, you don't understand what you're saying. If the timeline collapses, everyone dies. Not just you and me, but everyone. Your parents, your friends, everyone in Seoul, everyone in Korea, everyone in the world. All of existence gets wiped out. But if I go back to the real timeline, I won't remember you. I won't remember any of this. It'll be like it never happened. That's the point. You get to live a full life, fall in love with someone who can actually be there for you. Maybe have the family you asked about. You get to change the world in ways that matter. And you get to watch from the sidelines, alone, carrying the memory of what we could have been. Minho's voice was pained. It's what I signed up for when I became a guardian. Well, maybe I don't want to be saved if it means condemning you to eternal loneliness. That's not your choice to make, isn't it? Seo-yeon stepped closer, to him. You said the stabilizer requires a conscious choice from the person trapped in the loop. That's me, which means it is my choice. They stared at each other in the soft light of the Seoul night, the weight of impossible decisions hanging between them. Finally, Minho spoke. What if there was a third option? What kind of third option? What if we could break the loop and preserve your memories? It's never been tried before, and it's extremely dangerous, but theoretically possible. What would be the risks? The risks would be massive. Memory preservation during a timeline reset could cause paradoxes, temporal fractures, or worse. But if it worked, you would wake up in the real timeline with full knowledge of everything that's happened. You'd remember me, remember these loops, remember all the skills and knowledge you've gained. And then you'd have to make a choice. Live your normal life, knowing what you know, or what, or come with me. Become a temporal guardian yourself. Help me protect the timeline from other disruptions. The possibility hit her like lightning. Is that even possible? The guild has been looking for new guardians for decades. The work is dangerous and lonely, but it's also meaningful. You'd be protecting millions of lives, preserving the future, making sure history unfolds as it should. But I'd have to give up everything. My family, my friends, my career. You'd be giving up one life to save countless others. But yes, you'd have to leave everything behind. Seo-yeon walked back to the edge of the roof, her mind racing. Below her, Seoul continued its eternal dance of lights and movement, unaware that its entire existence hung in the balance of her decision. If I chose to become a guardian, would we be together? We'd be partners, Minho said carefully. We'd work together, travel together, face dangers together. But the life of a guardian is unpredictable. We might spend decades in the same timeline, or we might get separated for years while working different assignments. But we'd have a chance. We'd have a chance. She turned back to him. And if I chose to go back to my normal life, then you'd wake up tomorrow with your memories intact, knowing everything that happened here. You'd avoid the accident, give your presentation, and go on to change the world in all the ways you were meant to. Maybe you'd think of me sometimes. Maybe you'd look for me. But you'd never find me. I'd be in another timeline, helping someone else. The choice seemed impossible. Save the world, but lose the life she'd built. Or save her life, but lose the man she was starting to love. How long do I have to decide? Not long. The next loop is starting in about an hour. If we're going to try the memory preservation protocol, we need to do it at the exact moment the loop resets. Seo-yeon sat down on the ledge and put her head in her hands. This is the most important decision I'll ever make, and I have to make it with almost no time to think. Minho sat beside her. Can I tell you something that might help? Please. In every timeline where I've known you, you've always made the choice that helps the most people, even when it costs you personally. When you were a teacher, you chose to save your students instead of yourself. When you were a journalist, you chose to expose the truth, even though you knew it would put you in danger. You've never been the kind of person who puts her own happiness above the welfare of others. Are you trying to talk me into becoming a guardian? I'm trying to remind you who you are. Whatever choice you make, it will be the right one, because it will be authentically you. They sat in silence as the minutes ticked by. Seo-yeon could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her, but she could also feel something else, a sense of rightness, as if all the loops and all the conversations had been leading to this moment. Minho. Yes. In the original timeline, when we were supposed to meet, what was the first thing you were going to say to me? He smiled for the first time since they'd been talking. I was going to ask if you believed in fate. And what would I have said? I don't know. We never got that far. Seo-yeon stood up and walked over to him. Minho, do you believe in fate? I didn't used to. I thought everything was just cause and effect, actions and consequences. But after meeting you in 7 different timelines, after falling in love with the same person over and over again, he stood up and took her hands. Yes, I believe in fate. I believe some things are meant to happen, even if they have to happen in ways we never expected. Then I believe in it too. The city lights seemed to grow brighter around them as Seo-yeon made her choice. She could feel the loop beginning to weaken, reality starting to fray at the edges. In the distance, she could hear the sound of her alarm clock preparing to go off for the 94th time. I want to try the memory preservation, she said. I want to remember all of this, and then I want to decide what to do with that knowledge. Minho squeezed her hands. Are you sure? Once we start the process, there's no going back. I'm sure, but I have one condition. What's that? No matter what happens, no matter what choice I make when I wake up in the real timeline, I want you to promise me something, anything. Promise me that you'll remember this conversation. Promise me that you'll remember that someone, somewhere, chose to take a risk for love instead of playing it safe. I promise. Minho pulled out the temporal stabilizer and began entering a complex sequence of commands. The device hummed to life, casting strange shadows across the rooftop. In the distance, Seo-yeon could hear her alarm clock beginning to ring. This is it, Minho said. Are you ready? Seo-yeon took a deep breath and nodded. I'm ready. The world around them began to shimmer and fade. The last thing she saw was Minho's face, etched with love and hope and terror. The last thing she heard was his voice, barely audible over the sound of reality unraveling. I'll find you, he whispered. In whatever timeline you choose, I'll find you. And then everything went white. Seo-yeon woke up in her bed, sunlight streaming through her window. But something was different. The light was warmer, more golden than the artificial repetition she'd grown used to. The cherry blossoms outside her window were still blooming, but they seemed more vibrant, more alive. She sat up and looked at her phone. April 16th, 2025. The day after the loop. All of her memories came flooding back at once. 93 days of repetition, the mysterious man on the platform, the rooftop conversation, the impossible choice. She remembered everything, but she also remembered something else, something that hadn't been there in the loops, a business card on her nightstand that hadn't been there before. She picked it up and read the elegant script. Kang Min-ho, Temporal, Consulting Services. And below that, an address in Gangnam and a phone number. Her hands were shaking as she dialed the number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello? Minho? Seo-yeon. His voice was filled with relief and disbelief. You remember? I remember everything. But how are you here? How do you have a phone number and an address? The timeline reset created a new causality branch. I exist in this reality now, not as a guardian, but as a regular person. I woke up this morning with memories of my old life, but also with a new identity, a new history. I own a small consulting firm that helps companies with Timing issues. Seo-yeon laughed, tears streaming down her face. Temporal consulting. It seemed appropriate. And apparently, in this timeline, I've been waiting for you to call me. How long have you been waiting? According to my new memories, about 6 months. I've been having dreams about a woman I was supposed to meet, and yesterday, I finally figured out who it was. She was quiet for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of what had happened. So we both get to choose. We both get to decide what our lives look like from here on out. It seems that way. But Seo-yeon, I need you to know, I'm not a guardian anymore. I'm just a regular person now. I can't offer you adventures across timelines or the chance to save the world. Min-ho? Yes? Do you remember what you were going to ask me when we first met? She could hear the smile in his voice. I was going to ask if you believed in fate. Well, I do believe in fate. And I believe that sometimes the most important choice isn't between the extraordinary and the ordinary. Sometimes it's between fear and love. What are you saying? I'm saying that I don't need to save the world to have a meaningful life. I just need to find someone worth building a life with. An hour later, she was sitting in a coffee shop in Gangnam, waiting for Min-ho to arrive. She'd taken the subway, deliberately avoiding the intersection where she would have died in the original timeline. When the doors opened at Gangnam Station, she stepped out into her new life. He was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table, looking nervous and hopeful. When he saw her, his face lit up with the same expression she'd seen on the rooftop: love and hope, and the courage to take risks. "Hi," he said as she sat down across from him. "Hi," she replied. "So," he said, his eyes twinkling, "do you believe in fate?" "I believe in choice," she said. "I believe in taking chances. And I believe in second opportunities, even when they come in the strangest possible ways." "Does that mean you'd like to get to know each other? Starting from the beginning, with no expectations and no predetermined outcomes?" Seo-yeon reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers were warm, real, solid, nothing like the ethereal guardian she'd known in the loops. This was better. This was a man who could build a future with her, day by day, choice by choice. "I'd like that very much," she said. "But I have to warn you, I have some very strange memories of knowing you already." "That's okay," Min-ho said, squeezing her hand gently. "I have some pretty strange memories too. Maybe we can figure out what's real and what's dreams as we go along. What if the dreams turn out to be more real than reality? Then we'll make new dreams, better ones." They talked for hours that first day, sharing stories that felt like memories, discussing futures that felt like destiny. When evening came, Min-ho walked her to the subway station, and for the first time in months, Seo-yeon felt genuinely excited about tomorrow. As her train pulled away from the platform, she looked back and saw him standing there, waving goodbye. But this time, there was no desperation in his expression, no impossible words trying to cross the barrier between them. There was just love, patient and hopeful, waiting for her to come back. The next morning, she woke up on April 17th, 2025. The cherry blossoms were beginning to fall, making way for the bright green of new leaves. She had a presentation to give, not the same one from the loops, but a new project, a chance to build on the success of her breakthrough campaign. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Min-ho. "Good luck today. I know you'll be amazing." She texted back, "Thank you. Coffee after work? Always." As she got ready for her day, Seo-yeon reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She'd lived the same day 93 times, learned impossible things about love and time and choice, and ultimately discovered that the most extraordinary adventure wasn't about traveling through timelines or saving the world. It was about finding someone worth choosing, day after day, in the small moments that make up a life. Her presentation that day went even better than the one in the loops. Without the pressure of reliving the same day over and over, she felt more creative, more confident, more herself. The clients didn't just approve her campaign, They offered her a position as creative director for their entire Asian market expansion. That evening, she met Minho at their coffee shop in Gangnam. When she told him about the job offer, his face lit up with pride and excitement. "That's incredible," he said. "Are you going to take it?" "I don't know yet. It would mean more travel, more responsibility, less predictable schedules. It would also mean changing the world in exactly the way you were meant to." She looked at him across the table, this man who had loved her across multiple timelines, who had given up his extraordinary existence for the chance at an ordinary life with her. "What about us? What about building something together?" "Seo-yeon," he said gently, "I didn't fall in love with you because I wanted to hold you back from your destiny. I fell in love with you because of who you are when you're pursuing it. Take the job, change the world. I'll be here when you come home. Are you sure? I've waited for you across 7 timelines. I think I can handle some business travel." 6 months later, Seo-yeon was standing in a conference room in Singapore, presenting her latest campaign to executives from 12 different countries. The work was challenging, demanding, and exactly as fulfilling as Minho had predicted. She was changing how brands communicated across cultures, building bridges between East and West, tradition and innovation. But the best part of every trip was coming home to Seoul, to the apartment she now shared with Minho, to the life they were building together one choice at a time. A year after that, Minho proposed to her on the same rooftop where they'd made the decision to break the time loop. He'd filled the space with cherry blossoms, not the artificial repetition of the loops, but real flowers that would bloom and fade and bloom again in their own time. "I know we've technically already lived through several lifetimes together," he said, getting down on one knee. "But I'd like to officially ask you to spend just one more with me. The real one, from beginning to end, whatever that might look like." "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Their wedding was small but perfect. Her parents, his parents, who existed in this timeline, much to his surprise and delight, and a handful of close friends. Jinna was her maid of honor, still completely unaware that she'd once spent dozens of loops having the same conversation about office politics in the same pojangmacha. During the ceremony, as they exchanged vows they'd written themselves, Seo-yeon couldn't help but think about the impossibility of their love story. They'd found each other across time itself, had fallen in love in a space between seconds, had chosen each other despite knowing it meant giving up other versions of themselves. "Do you believe in fate?" Minho whispered as they danced their first dance as husband and wife. "I believe in choice," she whispered back. "I believe in love. And I believe in second chances, even when they come disguised as impossible situations. What about third chances, and fourth chances, and as many chances as it takes? Especially those." 2 years later, they welcomed their first child, a daughter with Minho's expressive eyes and Seo-yeon's determined chin. They named her Mirai, which means future, because she represented everything they'd fought so hard to protect and preserve. As Seo-yeon held her daughter for the first time, she thought about all the different versions of herself she'd been across the timelines. The teacher, the journalist, the woman trapped in loops, the temporal guardian she might have become. Each version had been real. Each had value, but none had been quite as complete as this one. She was still changing the world through her work. Her campaigns had indeed revolutionized international marketing, just as Minho had predicted. But she was also building something smaller and more personal. A family, a home, a love that existed not in the space between moments, but in the accumulation of shared days. "Do you ever miss it?" Minho asked one evening as they sat on their balcony, watching Mirai sleep in, her bassinet while Seoul twinkled below them. "The extraordinary life? The adventure of being a guardian?" "Never," Seo-yeon said without hesitation. "This is the adventure I was meant to have." "Even though it's ordinary?" "It's not ordinary," she said, taking his hand. "It's extraordinary. in all the ways that matter. We get to wake up next to each other every morning. We get to watch our daughter grow up. We get to grow old together. We get to choose each other over and over again, not because the universe is forcing us to, but because we want to. And if you could go back, if you could undo the loops, live your life without ever knowing about timelines and guardians and impossible choices, Seo-yeon thought about it for a moment, really considered what her life might have been like if she'd never gotten trapped in April 15th, 2024. She might have avoided the accident through pure chance, gone on to have a successful career, maybe met someone else, had a different kind of happiness. But she wouldn't have had this specific happiness. She wouldn't have had Minho, who loved her with the depth that comes from choosing someone across multiple lifetimes. She wouldn't have had their daughter, who carried the genetics of their impossible love story. She wouldn't have had the knowledge that love can literally reshape reality when it's strong enough and true enough. No, she said finally, I wouldn't change anything. Even the painful parts, even the confusion and the fear and the impossible choices. All of it led me here, to this moment, to this life, to you. Good, Minho said, lifting her hand to his lips and kissing her knuckles gently, because I plan to keep choosing you for the rest of time. Just the rest of time? Seo-yeon teased. What about beyond time? What about in whatever comes after? Especially then. As they sat together in the warm Seoul evening, their daughter sleeping peacefully beside them, Seo-yeon reflected on the strange truth of their love story. She'd been trapped in a single day for 93 loops, but those loops had led her to a lifetime of tomorrows. She'd been offered the chance to save the world, but she'd chosen instead to save one life, her own, and in doing so, she'd saved the world anyway. Because the world is saved, ultimately, not by grand gestures or extraordinary sacrifices, but by ordinary people making extraordinary choices, by choosing love over fear, hope over despair, connection over isolation, by believing that every day is a chance to begin again, and that the most powerful force in any timeline is the decision to keep choosing each other, one moment at a time. The cherry blossoms outside their window were blooming again, not the endless repetition of the loops, but the natural cycle of seasons, marking the passage of real time, real change, real growth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, new opportunities to build the life they'd dreamed of during those long nights on the rooftop. And for the first time in any timeline, Seo-yeon was genuinely excited to see what tomorrow would bring. The story of the woman who lived the same day over and over until he remembered her had become the story of two people who chose to remember each other every day, in every moment, in every choice they made together. And that, she thought, as she watched the stars appear one by one over Seoul, was the most extraordinary love story of all.